My name is Samuel Knight. At 33 years old, I have nothing to my name but rough hands, a small rundown apartment on the edge of an industrial city, and a dream that has yet to take shape, opening my own auto repair shop. Every day I wake up at 5 in the morning to the shrill ring of my alarm clock, drag myself out of a creaky old bed and step into a long day filled with the smell of motor oil and the clank of metal. I work at O'Malley's Garage, a large auto repair shop on the city's outskirts. The owner, Mr. O'Malley, is a decent man but stingy. He pays me enough to get by, but not enough to bring me closer to my dream. My job is fixing cars, everything from beat-up sedans to the growling pickups driven by working folks. I love the work, honestly. There's something comforting about taking apart a machine, finding the problem and making it run like new. It's straightforward, clear, unlike life outside where everything is messy and answers are never certain. My life is simple, almost dull, but I don't complain. My apartment is on the 3rd floor of an old building with stained yellow walls and a staircase that creaks with every step. It's small, just enough for a single guy like me. A twin bed, a scratched wooden table, and a kitchen corner always tinged with the smell of grease from my simple meals. I don't need much. A mechanic like me doesn't have time for lavish dreams. Every month, after paying rent, utilities, and buying some groceries, I tuck a few dollars into an iron box under my bed. That's my dream fund, built penny by penny through sweaty days in the garage. I'm not great at socializing. The guys at the shop tease me, calling me quiet as a clam, but I just shrug it off with a smile. I don't need a crowd of friends, don't need parties or weekend drinking sessions. After work, I go home, crack open a cold beer, sit by the window overlooking the noisy street, and think about my own garage. I imagine it with a small waiting area for customers, with leather chairs and a ceiling fan spinning overhead. Maybe I'd hang a wooden sign with my name carved into it, and every morning I'd open the garage doors, watching the sunlight spill over the cars waiting to be fixed. That dream, though distant, is what keeps me going each day. But life, as we all know, is never simple. I have a younger brother, Oliver, 4 years my junior. He's a completely different story. If I'm quiet and hardworking, Oliver lives like tomorrow doesn't exist. As a kid, he was the troublemaker, always seeking attention, from skipping school to getting into fights in the schoolyard. I was the opposite, the good kid, diligently doing homework and helping Mom clean the house, though she never praised me for it. As we grew up, Oliver took a different path. He became a real estate agent, a job that sounds glamorous but is anything but stable. Oliver has a gift for talking, a silver tongue that could convince anyone to buy a rundown house at an exorbitant price. But he lacks discipline. Whatever money he earns, he spends just as fast, on parties, expensive clothes, and lavish trips I never understood the purpose of. I tried to advise him to save, but Oliver would just laugh, clap me on the shoulder, and say, "Sam, why worry? Life's short, you gotta live it." Then Oliver got married. Her name was Abigail, a dancer at a bar. I met her exactly once at their wedding. Abigail was beautiful, with golden hair and a radiant smile, but her eyes held a restlessness, as if she were running from something. I didn't judge, but I knew their marriage wouldn't be smooth. Oliver and Abigail lived like two storms colliding, loud, chaotic, and unwilling to yield. They argued constantly, and soon enough I heard Abigail had gotten tangled up with alcohol, drugs, and gambling. Oliver wasn't much better. He started borrowing money, taking on debts I knew he'd never repay. I tried to keep my distance. I didn't want to be dragged into Oliver's mess. But 3 years ago, everything fell apart. Abigail died suddenly. A car accident, they said, but I heard whispers it was drug-related. She left behind 2 small children, Aries, a 4-year-old boy with big curious eyes, and Summer, a 1-year-old girl tiny as a kitten. I'd only met them at Abigail's funeral. That day, Aries stood silently, clutching Oliver's hand, while Summer lay in the arms of a distant relative, crying inconsolably. I thought Oliver would change after his wife's death. I hoped he'd sober up, become a good father to those 2 kids. But I was wrong. Oliver spiraled further than ever. He drank as if trying to drown the world. and his debts piled up like a mountain. I called, texted, tried to pull him out of the abyss, but Oliver just snapped, "Leave me alone, Sam. I can handle it." I knew he couldn't, but there was little I could do. I had my own life, my own dreams, and I couldn't carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. Our parents, who should have been our support, never cared. They live in a small town a few hours from the city, but the distance between us isn't just geographical. They're the kind of people who only look out for themselves. When I was a kid, they rarely checked on me, rarely came to my soccer games or saw me graduate. They were even colder to Oliver. When Abigail died, I called Mom, hoping she'd come help Oliver with the kids, but she just sighed over the phone. "You know I'm busy, Sam. Oliver made his mess, let him clean it up." Dad was blunter. "Don't drag me into that boy's problems." I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. I'd once hoped our family would be different, like the ones in movies where people hug, share burdens, and get through tough times together. But my family wasn't like that. We were just people who lived under the same roof, then went our separate ways, never looking back. The days after Abigail's funeral, Oliver was like an erratic shadow. Some nights he'd call me at midnight, his voice choked with tears, rambling about Abigail and the happy days they once shared. But just hours later, I'd hear he was drunk in a bar, arguing with creditors, or worse, vanishing for a week without a trace. I tried to reach out to pull him out of the abyss, but every time I called, he either didn't answer or responded with curt dismissals. "Sam, leave me alone. I'm fine." I knew he was running, not just from his creditors, but from his responsibilities to his 2 children. I wanted to help, but I didn't know where to start. I was just a mechanic, used to fixing machines, not mending the broken pieces of a family. Then one late evening, everything changed. I'd just gotten home from work, my hands still stained with motor oil, so exhausted I wanted nothing more than to collapse onto my bed and sleep. It was nearly 10 o'clock, and the city outside my window was bathed in the dim yellow glow of streetlights. The doorbell rang, a sharp sound cutting through the silence of my apartment. I frowned. No one visited me at this hour. I dragged myself to the door, unlocked it, and my heart stopped. Oliver stood there, his face gaunt, eyes bloodshot, his wrinkled shirt reeking of alcohol. He held Summer, the 1-year-old, asleep on his shoulder, her blonde hair falling messily over her tiny face. Beside him was Aries, the 4-year-old, clinging to his father's leg, his wide eyes filled with fear as he looked at me like I was a stranger. They looked like refugees lost in this cold industrial city. "Sam," Oliver said, his voice hoarse, almost pleading. "Can you help me? I've got a project out of town. Just a few days. Can you watch the kids for me?" I looked at him, then at the children. Summer stirred in his arms, and Aries gripped the hem of his father's shirt, his small hands trembling. I wanted to ask a dozen questions. What project? Where? Why now? But looking into Oliver's cloudy eyes, I knew he was lying. I knew this project was just an excuse, a way for him to escape the mess he'd created. But I also saw Aries and Summer, 2 innocent kids caught in the crosshairs of abandonment. I couldn't turn my back on them. "All right," I heard myself say, my voice dry. "Bring them in." Oliver let out a sigh of relief, as if shedding a heavy burden. He handed Summer to me, the little girl light as a bird. Aries followed, silent, his eyes never leaving me. I led them into my small apartment, a place barely big enough for 1 person. Oliver set down an old cloth bag on the floor containing a few children's clothes and some diapers. "I'll be back soon, Sam," he said, but his voice lacked conviction, as if he didn't believe his own words. "Just a few days, I promise." I nodded, saying nothing. That night, my small apartment turned into a battlefield. Summer woke up at midnight screaming, her cries tearing through the quiet. I clumsily held her, rocking gently, trying to recall how Mom used to soothe us as kids, but it didn't work. Aries sat curled up on the couch, clutching an old teddy bear, his eyes wide as he watched me. "Uncle, where's my dad going?" he asked, his voice tiny, almost lost. I didn't know how to answer. I just whispered, "Go to sleep, Aries. Your dad will be back soon. Everything will be okay." But I didn't believe my own words. I mixed formula for summer, my hands shaking as I spilled powder on the table. I cleaned the floor, changed diapers, and tried to get her back to sleep, my mind reeling with questions. What was I going to do with these kids? What did I know about childcare? And most importantly, would Oliver come back? The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos. Every morning I woke up earlier than usual, trying to make breakfast for Ari's. Peanut butter sandwiches, the only thing I knew how to make, and mixing formula for summer. I dropped Aries off at a nearby daycare, paying extra for them to take an unregistered child. Summer went to another daycare where the teacher gave me a pitying look when she saw my oil-stained hands. Then I rushed to the garage, working like a machine, trying not to think about the 2 kids waiting for me at home. I called Oliver every day, but his phone was always out of service. I texted, left voicemails, even tried reaching him on social media, but got no response. A week passed, then 2. I kept glancing at the door, hoping against hope for the impossible. That Oliver would walk in, put a hand on my shoulder, and say, "I'm back, thanks, for everything you've done for the kids." But there was nothing but the whistle of wind through my old window. By the 3rd week, I began to understand. Oliver wasn't coming back. His promise of a few days was just an excuse to run away, leaving his 2 children with me, a burden I was never prepared to carry. My small apartment, once a haven of quiet, was now filled with cries, laughter, and nameless worries. I thought about my dream of opening a garage, about the money saved in the iron box under my bed. I thought about the days of freedom when I only had to worry about myself. And then I looked at the kids, their innocent faces depending on me, though I wasn't sure I had the strength. My heart was heavy, but there was also a warmth creeping in. I didn't choose this path, but it had chosen me. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't turn my back. The days passed, and I lived with a faint hope that Oliver would return. Each morning when the doorbell rang, usually the mailman or a neighbor borrowing something, my heart raced, thinking it might be my brother, stepping in with a sheepish smile and an apology. Every time my phone buzzed, I grabbed it, hoping to hear Oliver's voice saying he'd finished his project and was ready to take his kids back. But there was nothing. Just bills, spam texts, and cold silence from the other end. I called him daily, leaving long voicemails. "Oliver, where are you? The kids need you. Call me back." But those words were like stones thrown into a void with no echo. I tried reaching out to our parents, hoping they could help me track Oliver down or at least share some of the burden of caring for the kids. I called Mom, my voice trembling, telling her about Oliver's disappearance, the 2 children, and how I was managing alone. But she just sighed over the phone, her voice flat like she was reading an old newspaper. "Samuel, you brought this trouble on yourself, so deal with it." "I'm old, how can I help?" Dad was even blunter. "That's Oliver's problem. Don't drag me into it." I hung up, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't surprised, but their coldness still stung my chest. I wondered, is there any family where people turn their backs on each other like this? In my small apartment, I began learning how to be a father with no one to guide me. Each morning, I woke up early, fumbling to mix formula for summer, my hands still stained with motor oil from the previous day's shift. I read the instructions on the formula can, measuring each scoop carefully as if assembling a car engine. Once I spilled milk on the table, and in that moment, I wanted to scream in frustration. But then Summer looked at me, her big round eyes filled with innocent trust, and I told myself I had to try. Aries was different. The 4-year-old was quieter than I'd expected, but each of his questions was like a puzzle with no solution. Every night as I spread an old mattress on the floor for him to sleep, Aries would ask, "Where's Dad? When's he coming back?" I didn't know how to answer. I'd just sit beside him, ruffle his hair, and say meaningless things like, "Your dad's really busy, but he'll be back soon." But every time I said it, I felt like I was betraying him. I knew Oliver wasn't coming back, but I didn't have the courage to tell the truth. As the days went by, my small apartment became a new world, filled with sounds I wasn't used to. Summer's cries in the middle of the night, the patter of Aries' tiny feet running across the wooden floor, the whispers of the boy as he played with old toys I'd scavenged from the building's discard pile. I bought a small crib for Summer, placing it beside my bed, and every night I woke up just to check if she was breathing evenly. I didn't know why I did it. Maybe because I was afraid I'd do something wrong and lose these kids. I still went to work at the garage, but every day was a race against time. I left at dawn, dropped Aries off at daycare, Summer at another, then rushed to the shop. There I buried myself in machines trying to focus, but my mind was always on the kids. Was Aries being teased for his old clothes? Was Summer crying when I wasn't there? I worked faster, trying to finish early to get back to them, but sometimes I just wanted to sit in a corner of the garage, hold my head and let everything go. A month passed, then two. Oliver remained a ghost. I checked his phone number, scoured social media, even asked old acquaintances from his rough neighborhood. No one knew where he was. One said he'd left the city, another said he was hiding from creditors. I didn't know what was true, but I knew one thing. Oliver had abandoned his children, and that burden now rested on my shoulders. One evening I sat on the wooden floor, leaning against the wall, watching Aries and Summer. Aries was scribbling on a scrap of paper, his strokes messy but focused. Summer lay in her crib, her tiny hands clutching the edge of her blanket, babbling nonsense sounds. I thought about what I could do. I could take them to an orphanage, a place that, according to the daycare teacher, would take good care of kids without families. The thought made me shudder. I imagined Aries and Summer in a strange room among other children, with no one knowing what they liked, feared, or dreamed of. I pictured Aries' panicked eyes, the way Summer clung to me whenever I held her. I couldn't do it. I couldn't abandon them, couldn't let them feel forsaken again. I stood up, walked to Aries, and sat beside him. "What are you drawing?" I asked gently. He looked up, his eyes brightening slightly. "A car," he said, pointing to the scribbled outline of a vehicle. "Like the ones you fix." I smiled, though my heart was heavy. I looked at Summer, wiggling in her crib, then back at Aries. Those young faces, so full of life, were begging me not to let go. In that moment, I made a decision. I tightened my grip on my shirt as if steadying myself. From now on, I whispered to myself, they're my kids. Even if I have to work myself to the bone, even if I have to give up my dream of a garage, I'll raise them. That promise wasn't just to Aries and Summer. It was to myself, a vow that I wouldn't be like Oliver, wouldn't be like our parents. I would be the one who stayed, no matter how tough the road ahead. That decision changed everything. I was no longer just Samuel Knight, the mechanic with a dream of owning a garage. I was Samuel, the reluctant father of 2 children, and my life now revolved around them. I didn't know if I could do it well, but I knew I'd try, day by day, hour by hour, for those young faces depending on me. My small apartment, once just enough for a single guy, was now cluttered with unfamiliar things. Colorful plastic toys littered the floor, a few broken-wheeled toy cars I'd promised to fix but never had time for. Children's clothes, Aries' tiny t-shirts, Summer's flowery dresses, hung haphazardly on hooks mixed with my oil-stained work coveralls. The sounds were different too. Gone were the quiet nights when I sat alone with a beer. Now there were Aries' giggles, Summer's cries for milk, and my own sighs as I tried to navigate this new life. I tidied the apartment, giving up my old bed to the kids. Aries and Summer slept together on it, curled up under a thin blanket, while I spread an old mattress on the floor beside the scratched wooden table. The first night on the floor, my back ached, but I didn't dare complain. I watched the kids sleep, the glow from the streetlight slipping through the curtains to light their faces, and I told myself, I can do this. As long as they're okay, I can do this. Mornings became a race. I woke at 5, fumbling in the kitchen to make breakfast. Bread with butter, sometimes a burnt-edged fried egg because I was too busy watching the clock. I woke Aries, helped him into his wrinkled daycare uniform, and carried Summer, still sleepy, to drop them off at daycare and preschool. The early morning streets were cold with fog clinging to my jacket, but Ari's curious gaze at passing cars or the way summer gripped my finger made me forget the chill. My mechanic's salary, once enough for a frugal single life, now felt suffocatingly inadequate. Daycare fees, formula, new clothes for the kids. Everything was like a bottomless pit swallowing every dollar I earned. I opened the iron box under my bed, staring at the savings I'd scraped together for my garage dream. $3,000, each cent earned through sweat and overtime, now trickled away on necessities. New shoes for Aries, fever medicine for summer, or a warm coat as winter approached. My dream garage, the shiny Knight's Garage sign in my mind, faded like a luxurious fantasy. Old friends still called, inviting me for beers, baseball games, or just to catch up like old times. "Sam, what kind of life are you living?" "Come hang out and relax," they'd say, laughing over the phone. I'd force a smile, politely decline. I had no time, no energy for gatherings. My life now revolved around 3 points: the garage, the school, and the small apartment. Every step I took felt heavy, as if I were dragging an entire world behind me. The pressure sometimes felt like it would crush me. A late electric bill brought a disconnection warning, and I scrambled to scrape together the money. Once Ari's shoes tore open, but I couldn't afford new ones, and I saw him try to walk carefully to hide the rip. The worst was a night when Summer spiked a high fever. Her face flushed, her breathing rapid. I carried her, running to the nearest hospital because a taxi was too expensive. In the ER, sitting on a hard plastic chair, holding Summer in my arms, I felt so helpless I wanted to cry. Yet amidst those grueling days, there were moments that gave me strength. One evening, I saw Aries at the kitchen table, diligently working on his homework with a blunt pencil. He bit his lip, focused on drawing numbers, and when he looked up and saw me, he gave a small but radiant smile. Summer was different. She loved to sing. Some afternoons, while I washed dishes, she sat on the floor humming tuneless but clear melodies like the chime of a bell. Her voice, though young, seemed to wash away my fatigue. I looked at them and I knew I couldn't give up. I slowly adjusted to my new role. I was no longer the single man living for his own dreams. I was a father, clumsy but determined, quietly doing everything to give 2 kids a home. Then one evening, everything shifted. I was sitting on the floor tinkering with one of Ari's broken toy cars. My hands, still rough from motor oil, carefully tightened a tiny screw. Aries sat beside me watching, then suddenly said, "Thank you, Papa." I froze, my hand pausing midair. The word Papa rang out softly but hit my heart like a thunderbolt. I looked at Aries, seeing his eyes. No longer the panicked gaze from that first day, but one of trust, as if I'd become his whole world. I wanted to correct him, to say I was just his uncle, not his father. But then I saw his shy smile, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. Tears welled up, but I smiled, nodding. "You're welcome, kid," I said, my voice hoarse. From that day on, both Aries and Summer started calling me Papa. At first I felt awkward, but each time they said it, I felt the love and trust in those words. I let them call me that because I knew to them I had truly become their father. Evenings in the old apartment became warm memories. We gathered around the kitchen table, eating simple dinners. Pasta, sandwiches, sometimes a plate of fries I made to cheer them up. We turned on the TV, watching old cartoons, laughing loudly when the main character took a tumble. Summer's clear voice often rang out, and I sat there listening, my heart feeling lighter. No matter how exhausted I was, no matter how many days I thought I'd collapse, Aries' innocent eyes and Summer's carefree smile became my lifeline. I realized that amidst the struggles, a new family had formed. It wasn't born from blood, but from hard days, from sacrifice, and from overcoming hardships together. This small, run-down apartment, though cramped, had become a home. Mine, Aries, and Summer's. Time passed in the blink of an eye. Aries was now 12, a lanky, quiet, and intelligent teenager. He resembled me in his reserved nature, in the patient way he faced challenges, as if he'd learned from watching me struggle through those early days. Summer, the tiny girl I once held in my arms, was now 9. with shimmering blonde hair and eyes bright as sunlight. She was a whirlwind, always bringing life to our small apartment, and her most special gift was her voice, as if she were born to sing sweet, soulful melodies. At first I thought Summer just sang for fun. Every afternoon while I washed dishes in the kitchen corner, she'd sit by the window humming improvised songs, her clear voice blending with the sounds of traffic outside. Some days she'd sing while helping me fold laundry and I'd just smile, thinking it was a childish whim. But then a school performance changed everything. Summer, in a simple green dress I'd bought from a discount store, stepped onto the small auditorium stage. When she began to sing, the room fell silent. Her voice soared like a stream flowing over rocks, both powerful and gentle. I sat in the back row, gripping the edge of my chair, my heart pounding. When the song ended, the room erupted in applause and my eyes stung with tears. Not because I knew music, but because I saw the sparkle in Summer's eyes as she looked at me as if saying, "Papa, I did it." Summer's music teacher, Mrs. Harris, approached me after the performance. "Samuel," she said, her voice brimming with excitement, "Summer has a rare talent. She needs proper vocal training. I know a great program in the city." I nodded, thanking her, but my heart sank. Vocal lessons? That was a world foreign to me, and more importantly, a cost I wasn't sure I could afford. But that evening, when Summer ran to hug me, talking about how it felt to stand on stage and how she wanted to sing forever, I looked into her eager eyes and knew I couldn't say no. I'd scrimped and saved for years to raise these kids, and now I'd do it again, for Summer's dream. Every week after long shifts at the garage, I took Summer to vocal lessons. I stood outside, peering through the small window, watching her stand among other kids, practicing high notes under the teacher's guidance. Some days I was so exhausted I wanted to sleep right there in the waiting chair, but when Summer ran out, beaming and talking about a new song, my fatigue melted away. At night, our small apartment echoed with her singing. She practiced in front of the mirror, her voice ringing out like magic, transforming our cramped, stressful space into a place of hope. Then a real opportunity came. A children's singing competition was held in town, and Mrs. Harris convinced me to let Summer participate. I was nervous, not because I doubted her talent, but because I feared the spotlight would overwhelm her. But when she stood on stage in a simple white dress, her voice was like a beam of light. She sang about a little house by the river, and the audience fell silent, then erupted in applause when she finished. Summer won first place, and I, standing in the corner of the auditorium, hugged Ari's tightly, my heart swelling with pride. From there, things moved quickly. The local paper wrote about the little angel with a golden voice. A TV channel invited Summer to perform on a children's program. People in town started recognizing her, smiling as we passed by. Summer was still my little girl, but I knew she was stepping into a bigger world, a world I, a mechanic, didn't fully understand. One day, a man in a sleek suit appeared at our apartment door. He introduced himself as a representative from an entertainment company in the city, saying they wanted to sign Summer to a long-term contract. "She has the potential to be a star," he said, handing me a thick stack of documents. "We'll put her on big stages, produce albums, even international performances." I held the papers, my mind spinning. I was just a mechanic, never imagining things like contracts or stardom. I looked at Summer, seeing her eyes light up whenever she talked about music, about her dream of singing for the world. I thought of the grueling days, the nights I worked to exhaustion to raise these kids. If this was the path to her happiness, I told myself, I had to support her. I agreed to sign the contract with the entertainment company. Afterward, I contacted a lawyer, an old friend of Mr. O'Malley's, to review the terms. He advised me to open a Coogan account where 15% of Summer's earnings would be locked away until she turned 18. Untouchable by anyone, even her biological parents. To protect her future, I nodded and immediately set up the account, ensuring that if Oliver ever returned, he couldn't claim her earnings. Summer's first performances brought unexpected income. Fees, audience gifts, and an art scholarship. It was like a dream. I used a small portion to improve our lives. A new bed for Aries in summer, a repair for the old gas stove, and a new pair of shoes for Aries so he wouldn't feel ashamed at school. The rest I saved, thinking of the kids' future. Our small apartment now echoed with music, laughter, and new dreams. For the first time in years, I felt hope, not for my garage dream, but for a bright future for Aries in summer. Aries, now a teenager, remained quiet but always stood by his sister. He was proud of Summer, though sometimes I caught him watching her on stage with a hint of worry. I understood that feeling. I was proud of Summer's shine, but deep down I was afraid. Her spotlight was attracting attention from the outside, strangers with sweet promises and worse, greedy eyes. I never expected that among them would be Oliver, their biological father who'd vanished for nearly a decade, now quietly returning with calculations I hadn't prepared to face. One late afternoon, I stepped out of the garage, my hands still heavy with the smell of motor oil, my back aching from a long day hunched over engines. The sun had set, leaving the industrial city sky a murky gray, and all I wanted was to return to the apartment, share a simple dinner with Aries in summer, listen to her talk about music class, or laugh with Aries about school. But as I turned onto the street leading to my building, I froze. A sleek car, the kind I'd only seen in commercials, was parked out front. The door opened and out stepped a man I barely recognized. Oliver, my brother. After nearly a decade without a word, he stood there, dressed like a successful businessman. A sharp navy suit hugged his frame, his hair slicked back, and his leather shoes gleamed under the streetlights. Beside him was a man in a crisp black suit holding a briefcase, his face cold as a statue. I stood frozen, my mind reeling. Oliver, the man who abandoned his children, who I'd called, texted, and searched for without a single response, was now standing before me as if he'd never disappeared. "Sam," Oliver said, his voice smooth but strained. He stepped forward, flashing a smile I knew was fake. "Brother, thanks for taking care of the kids all this time. I'm back now. I want to take them home." His words hit me like a knife to the chest. I stood stunned, staring into his eyes, searching for any trace of the brother I once knew. But his gaze was cold, calculating like a wolf sizing up its prey. I glanced at Aries in summer, whom I'd just picked up from school, now standing close by. Aries held his sister's hand, his eyes sharp and wary, while Summer pressed against me, her small hand clutching my shirt as if afraid of being torn away. "Take them home?" I repeated, my voice hoarse, struggling to stay calm as my blood boiled. "You talk like you were only gone a few days. Oliver, where were you for 8 years? When Aries had a fever all night, when Summer cried for milk and I didn't know what to do, when I worked myself raw to raise them day by day, where were you? Answer me." Oliver avoided my gaze, looking down at his polished shoes. "Sam, don't make a big deal out of this," he said coldly. "I'm stable now. I've remarried. My new wife can take care of the kids, especially Summer. You know she's got musical talent. I want to help her grow, manage her career." I went numb. Each word was like a needle stabbing my heart. Oliver hadn't returned for fatherly love. He was back for Summer's spotlight, for the articles praising the little angel with a golden voice. For the lucrative contracts the entertainment company was dangling before us. He didn't see Aries and Summer as his children, but as an opportunity, a way to make money, to make up for the years he'd squandered on alcohol and debt. The man in the suit stepped forward, handing me a thick folder. "Mr. Samuel Knight," he said, his voice flat like he was reading a script. "This is a petition for custody filed by Mr. Oliver Knight. It states that you've been unlawfully keeping the children, preventing their biological father from contact." I took the folder, my hands trembling, not from fear but from rage. "Unlawfully?" I growled, locking eyes with Oliver. "You abandoned them, Oliver. You left 2 kids with me, not a word, not a call. I raised them, paid their school fees, held them when they cried for you. And now you dare say I'm keeping them unlawfully?" Oliver didn't respond. He stood there, eyes averted, hands in his pockets as if hiding his unease. The lawyer interjected, his voice still cold. "Mr. Knight, we're just following the law. Mr. Oliver's their biological father and he has rights." "Rights?" I cut him off, my voice louder than I intended. "What rights does he have when he's never fulfilled a father's responsibilities? What does he know about Aries, about Summer? Does he know what they like, what they fear, what they dream of?" The air outside the building grew tense like a taut string about to snap. Aries, standing beside me, suddenly stepped forward, small but resolute, shielding Summer like a protector. "I'm not going with him," he said, his voice trembling but firm. "I'm staying with Papa." Summer, her eyes brimming with tears, pressed closer to me, her small hand gripping tighter. "I don't want to go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I want to stay with Papa." Hearing the kids call me Papa tightened my chest. I gripped their shoulders, pulling them close as if shielding them from the world. Oliver watched, the forced smile fading from his face. "Sam," he said, his voice lowering, almost pleading. "Don't make this hard. They're my kids. You're just their uncle." "Just their uncle?" I repeated, my voice shaking with anger and pain. "I've been with them for 8 years. I stayed up nights when they were sick, took them to school, wiped their tears when they missed you. And you? You're just a name on their birth certificates." The lawyer cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Mr. Samuel, we can resolve this in court, but I advise you to cooperate. Mr. Oliver has legal rights." "Stop," I interrupted, staring at Oliver. "You want to drag these kids into court? You want to make them choose between you and me after everything you've done?" Oliver didn't answer. He looked at Aries and Summer, but his eyes held no love, only calculation. I knew he hadn't come back to be a father. He came for Summer's voice, for the money her talent was bringing in. The reunion I'd once dreamed of, back when I hoped Oliver would come to his senses, had turned into a fiery confrontation outside my rundown apartment. I tightened my grip on Aries and Summer, feeling their warmth. "You want to take them, Oliver?" I said, my voice slow but resolute. "You'll have to go through me first. I'll fight to the end to keep them." Oliver met my gaze, his eyes wavering, but he said nothing more. The lawyer tugged his arm, whispering something, and they turned back to the sleek car. As the door slammed shut and the engine roared, fading into the darkness, I stood there, holding the kids tightly, my heart heavy but resolute. Oliver wouldn't give up easily, and I knew this battle wasn't over. The days that followed were suffocatingly tense. The legal documents Oliver's lawyer had given me sat on the kitchen table, heavy as a stone, pressing on my chest. I opened them, reading the cold words. "Samuel Knight has unlawfully kept the children, preventing their biological father from access." Each word was like a knife, slicing into the years of sacrifice I'd given. I was devastated, not because I feared losing the case, but because of the thought that I might lose Aries and Summer, the 2 children who had become my entire world. One evening, after dropping the kids off at home, I drove to the garage, the only place where I could think clearly. I sat in a corner of the shop under the cold fluorescent lights, my rough hands trembling as I held the documents. I knew Oliver didn't deserve to be a father. He'd abandoned them without looking back. But the law didn't care about the nights I wiped Ari's tears or carried Summer to the hospital. The law saw Oliver as their biological father, and that, in the eyes of the court, gave him an advantage I didn't have. If I didn't prepare, didn't gather evidence, I could lose everything. I started taking action, though my hands still shook and my mind was a mess. I dug through my old phone, finding messages from 8 years ago when I tried contacting Oliver after he left the kids. My desperate texts were still there, unanswered. "Oliver, where are you? Call me back, please. Aries is asking for you." I saved every message, every email, every piece of evidence showing he'd vanished from his children's lives. I knocked on the door of Mr. Henry, the widower downstairs, who always sat by his window watching the street. He knew everything that happened in the neighborhood. When I told him about Oliver, he nodded, his eyes narrowing. "I never saw that guy come back, Samuel," he said, his voice gravelly. You're the only one I've seen picking up and dropping off those kids day after day. If you need me, I'll testify for you." His words were like a ray of light in a storm, and I thanked him, though my heart remained heavy. I went to Aries and Summer's old preschool, meeting their teacher. Ms. Miller, the daycare owner, looked at me with sympathy. "Samuel, you're the only one who dropped off Summer, paid her fees, attended parent meetings," she said, agreeing to write a letter of confirmation. The kids' current teachers did the same, recounting how I'd arrived late to parent meetings because of overtime shifts but was always there, always listening to every word about Aries. Those letters, though just pieces of paper, were to me like bricks building a foundation of hope. But despite the evidence, a fear gnawed at me. Did Aries and Summer truly want to stay with me? Deep down, I was afraid they might still hold a small corner of their hearts for Oliver. I feared that, despite all the love I'd poured into them, they might choose to leave. That thought kept me awake at night, lying on my old mattress, staring at the stained ceiling, wondering if I could face their answer. One evening, as the three of us sat around the kitchen table eating a simple dinner of pasta with tomato sauce, I decided I had to ask. I couldn't keep living in that fear. I set my plate down, took a deep breath, and looked at Aries and Summer. "Aries, Summer," I began, my voice trembling. "We need to talk." Aries looked up, his eyes calm but wary. Summer stopped chewing, gazing at me with curiosity. The room was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock. "The man from the other day, he's your real dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He wants to take you to live with him." "I don't know. Do you want to go with him?" "I'll respect whatever you decide." The air seemed to freeze. My heart pounded, as if the whole world was waiting for their response. Aries looked at me, his eyes sharp. No longer those of the 4-year-old who asked, "Where's Dad, Uncle?" He set his fork down, his voice slow but resolute. "I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay here. That man isn't my dad. I don't want to live with him." His words were like a warm breeze melting the cold in my heart. I turned to Summer, seeing her eyes well up. She pushed her chair back, ran to me, and wrapped her small arms around me tightly. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice choked, her cheek pressed against my chest. "Papa is my dad. From the start, it's only been Papa. I don't want to leave you." I was speechless, my throat tight. I wrapped my arms around both Aries and Summer, pulling them close, feeling the warmth of their small bodies. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I didn't need to. In that moment, I knew the love we'd built. Through the grueling days, the simple meals, the times I held their hands through hardship, was stronger than blood. Oliver might be their biological father, but I was their true dad. I held them tightly, whispering, "Papa promises no matter what happens, I'll fight to the end to keep you." That promise wasn't just a commitment to Aries and Summer. It was a vow to myself. I wouldn't let Oliver or anyone take away the family I'd poured my heart into building. A few weeks later, I stood in the family courthouse in the heart of the industrial city, my heart pounding in my chest. I wore my old suit, the only one I owned, its shoulders worn and slightly tight. But I stood tall, holding Aries and Summer's hands. Aries looked serious in the crisp shirt I'd ironed the night before, while Summer in a simple white dress, her big round eyes glancing around with a hint of nervousness. Beside me was Mr. Carter, a lawyer recommended by Mr. O'Malley. He was a kind man with a warm, steady voice, and though I couldn't afford much, he promised to do his best for me. The courtroom was cold, the air thick with the smell of old wood and paperwork. We sat in the front row, facing Oliver across the aisle. He sat there, dressed impeccably in a sleek black suit, his hair slicked back like a movie star. Beside him was a young, beautiful woman with wavy brown hair and bright red lips. She held his hand, looking at Aries and Summer, but not with a mother's warmth. Her gaze was that of someone seeing an investment, a chance to profit from Summer's voice. I tightened my grip on Aries' hand, trying to suppress the anger rising within me. The hearing began. Oliver's lawyer, a man named Grayson, stood up, his voice smooth as oil. "Your Honor," he began, Mr. Oliver Knight is the biological father of Aries and Summer Knight. He has faced personal hardships but is now stable with a new family and the means to provide his children with a better life. Meanwhile, Mr. Samuel Knight has kept the children without legal guardianship, preventing their biological father from access. Each word felt like a hammer blow. I wanted to jump up, shout that Oliver had abandoned them, that he hadn't cared for 8 years. But Mr. Carter placed a hand on my shoulder, whispering, "Stay calm, Samuel. Our turn will come." I nodded, though my blood was boiling. Mr. Carter stood, his voice calm but sharp. "Your Honor, Mr. Samuel Knight has not only cared for Aries and Summer for the past 8 years, but has been their true father. He has sacrificed everything, his time, his energy, his personal dreams, to raise the children their biological father, Mr. Oliver Knight, abandoned without explanation. We have evidence proving Mr. Oliver made no contact or support during that time." I was called to the stand. Standing before the judge under the gaze of the courtroom, my throat felt dry. I took a deep breath and began, my voice hoarse but steady. 8 years ago, my brother Oliver left Aries and Summer at my door, saying he'd be gone a few days. He never came back. I raised them, took them to school, paid their fees with my mechanic's salary. I gave them everything they needed. I'm not their biological father, but I've done everything to give them a home. I looked at Aries and Summer, seeing their eyes fixed on me, and I knew I had to keep going. I'm not perfect, but I love them. They're my kids. The courtroom fell silent. I returned to my seat, my hands trembling, but my heart lighter. I had spoken the truth, and that was all I had. Then something unexpected happened. Summer raised her hand, asking to speak. The judge, an older man with a stern but not unkind expression, nodded. Summer stepped forward, her small hands clutching the hem of her dress, her voice trembling but clear. "I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay with Papa Samuel. I sing because it makes me happy, because I want to make Papa proud." She looked at Oliver, her eyes brimming with tears but resolute. "That man isn't my dad. Papa Samuel is my dad, the one who's always been there since I was little." The room went quiet, as if everyone held their breath. I felt hot tears well up, but I fought them back. Aries asked to speak next. He stood tall and steady for his age, his voice calm. "I don't remember anything about the father named Oliver. I only know Papa Samuel, the one who raised me, taught me, protected me. I want to stay with Papa." Their words were like a powerful wind, sweeping away Oliver's arguments. I saw Oliver shift uneasily in his seat, his eyes wavering. Suddenly he stood, shouting, "They're my kids. I have the right to raise them. Samuel's just a mechanic. How can he give them a good future? I have money, connections. I can take Summer to the top." The judge banged his gavel, his voice stern. "Order!" He turned to Oliver, his gaze piercing. "Mr. Knight, where were you for the past 8 years? Do you have any evidence showing you attempted to contact or support your children?" Oliver went silent, sweat beading on his forehead. He stammered, searching for an answer, but had nothing but evasions. His new wife, sitting beside him, looked away, as if distancing herself from his failure. Mr. Carter stood, presenting the evidence I'd painstakingly gathered. "Your Honor, these are bank statements showing Mr. Samuel Knight covered all expenses for Aries and Summer over 8 years. From school fees to clothes to medicine. These are letters from neighbors and teachers confirming Mr. Oliver Knight never appeared or contacted the children. Meanwhile, Mr. Samuel attended every parent meeting, picked them up daily, and built a true home for them." The courtroom crackled with tension. All eyes turned to the judge. He flipped through the documents, his brows furrowed, then looked up, his voice stern but clear. "The court will make a decision after considering the best interests of the children. This hearing is adjourned." I held Aries and Summer's hands, walking out of the courtroom, my heart heavy but no longer afraid. The children's words, the evidence I'd brought, and the love we'd built were like a fire warming me through the storm. I didn't know what the verdict would be, but I knew I'd done everything I could. And when Summer looked up, smiling at me, and Aries squeezed my hand, I felt I'd already won, no matter what the court said. The days waiting for the verdict stretched on like a century. I still took Aries and Summer to school, worked at the garage, and listened to Summer sing in our small apartment each evening. But every night after the kids were asleep, I sat on the wooden floor staring at the legal documents, my heart uneasy. I couldn't imagine life without Aries and Summer. They weren't just children I'd raised. They were my family, the reason I woke up each morning, the fire that kept me going even when I wanted to collapse. Then the day of the verdict arrived. I stood outside the courthouse, still in my old worn-shouldered suit, holding Aries and Summer's hands. The courtroom was more crowded today, the air taut like a string about to snap. Oliver sat across from us, still polished in his sleek black suit, but his eyes lacked the confidence they once held. His new wife sat beside him, her red lips pressed tightly, her gaze cold. The judge, Mr. Harrison, entered, his face stern but not harsh. He flipped through the documents, surveyed the room, and spoke in a deep, resonant voice. After reviewing all evidence and hearing the testimonies, he began. The court rules as follows. Legal guardianship of Aries and Summer Knight is granted to Mr. Samuel Knight. I stood frozen as if I couldn't believe my ears. The gavel struck, but I heard nothing except those words echoing in my mind. The judge continued, his voice slow but clear. The best interests of the children lie not in blood ties on paper, but in where they are truly loved, cared for, and protected. Mr. Samuel Knight has proven himself to be the true father of these children, not only through his actions, but through his unwavering love and sacrifice over the past 8 years. I turned to look at Oliver. He was pale, his head bowed, his hands clenched on the table. His new wife stood abruptly, her high heels clicking loudly as she hurried out of the courtroom, as if eager to escape his failure. All of Oliver's calculations, his dreams of money and glory from Summer's voice, crumbled in that moment. I didn't feel triumph, only a quiet sadness. I'd once hoped he'd change, become the father Aries and Summer deserved, but now I knew that would never happen. I turned back, and before I could process it, Aries and Summer ran to me, throwing themselves into my arms. Summer sobbed, her small face pressed against my chest, while Aries, trying to stay composed, choked up. "We're a family forever, right, Papa?" Summer whispered, her tear-filled eyes sparkling with trust. Aries nodded, squeezing my hand, and I felt my heart ready to burst. I sank to my knees on the courtroom floor, pulling them both into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down my face. I wasn't crying because I'd won the case, but because I could keep my promise to protect Aries and Summer with my entire life. We stood there, the three of us, amidst the gazes of lawyers, court clerks, and strangers, but to me, only we existed, my family. Back at our small apartment that evening, I ordered a pizza, a rare luxury I seldom allowed. We sat on the wooden floor, surrounded by scattered toys and children's clothes. The radio played an old song, and Summer hummed along, her voice soaring through the room. Aries, usually quiet, excitedly recounted a soccer game at school, his eyes lighting up as he described his goal. I sat there watching them, and for the first time in months, our rundown apartment felt warmer than ever. It wasn't just a shelter. It was our home, where we'd weathered the toughest days together. I looked at Summer, her blonde hair glowing under the light as she sang. I looked at Aries, laughing as he told his story, no longer the frightened boy who stood at my door 8 years ago. And I realized that talent, money, contracts, all could come and go. But love and responsibility, those were what sustained a family. That's what made us. When Summer finished singing, she ran to me, throwing her arms around me. "Papa, I'll sing lots to make you proud," she said, her smile radiant. I ruffled her hair, smiling. "You've already made me proud," I said, my voice hoarse. "You and Aries both." In that moment, I understood that family isn't just about blood. It's about who's willing to sacrifice everything for you. Lasting love and responsibility triumph over greed and abandonment. And a true father doesn't have to be the one who brought you into the world, but the one who stays, holds your hand, and walks with you through life's storms. I'd done that, and I would keep doing it. For Aries, for Summer, and for the small home we called ours.